Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today we have February 20th, and this is another of our bi-weekly SIG Apps calls. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. I don't have any particular announcements today. Maybe a quick reminder that the freeze is less than a month away. If I remember correctly, that something along 14th. So please put your PRs review as soon as possible for reviews as soon as possible. You okay? I was about to say that. Cool. I'm glad to hear that somebody can hear me. So that's pretty much all the announcement that I had. So we can move right away into the main discussion topics. Although you have a first topic about creating pod replacements in a job.
There is
You wanna
no
touch upon it?
audio today due to the holiday, but I can speak on that. So we would like to, yes, give you a heads up and potentially discuss now or when you drop comments. The issue that in a job, in the index jobs, the replacement pod, in case a pod is deleted, is created as soon as the pod is deleted. And this means that for a given index, if the graceful period for the pod that is deleted is like 1 minute, then for this 1 minute, there are two pods running at the same time that correspond to the same pod. And this is problematic for some frameworks such as TensorFlow, and in particular, like it fails with this exception that is shown here. And we are thinking of the proper solution uh, because this is like the very old behavior um, of the job, and like one can say that it's an maybe it's a issue with index jobs, but the index jobs are already like GA, so it's like tricky to modify. So with so one solution that we like propose is to piggyback on the pod failure policy that is currently in beta. So the idea is that when we what we do for pod failure policy, it's sort of related because we want to match failed pod only once it's failed against the configured pod failure policy, so that we have the exit codes and the complete status of the pod. So what we do is we wait with counting the pod as failed only until it's really failed, like it's in terminal phase. We don't. We still, for pod failure policy, currently create the replacement pod as soon as it's deleted. But we could. So this was proposed that we could also wait with creating the replacement pod. So this would work. However, then I don't know. It's up for discussion if this is the proper solution, or we could like claim that it's an issue with index jobs, and even though index job is already GA, we still fix it for index job. But then, as described here, it's unclear if there are like currently users who depend on the behavior of fast pod recreation. So again, up for discussion. If there are some comments here, then yeah, I will try to answer. If not, then yeah, please comment on the issue. What would you see? Like, do you see any potential problems with the fast recreation? Is the idea of using pod failure policy okay, or you have some other idea of solving this problem?
Uh, I have a question. Um, how would
Mhm.
this new mode, assuming that we allow uh, to replace only terminated pods, not the fully terminated pods, not the not running, how would that work with a regular job where you basically don't know whether you're replacing any particular pod. We're basically ensuring that the number is correct at
Mhm.
any given point in time when we're running a job. I can see how this actually fits the index job, just like you said, because you have a particular index assigned. So in the example that you that Aldo put in the description, it was about TensorFlow, where it knows, oh, this is a fourth, and we are replacing the fourth. So in that particular case, it does make sense. I'm having a hard time, and maybe I'm missing something, um, how that would apply to a regular job where basically job XYZ is replaced with job ABC, and there's no clear information that one is replacing the other.
Mhm. So that's a good question. So we are trying to, certainly we have a problem with index job, and that's confirmed. We don't know if we have problems with regular jobs. Maybe we don't. How this could work is just, job controller tries to maintain the number of active pods. So when a pod is deleted, we currently don't count it as active as soon as it has the deletion timestamp. So we could delay and still count it as active for as long as it's not in the terminal phase, like succeeded or failed. So then
I
this
mean,
would mean that we don't create the replacement pod because job controller still thinks that there is the number of active pods matches the expected number of active pods.
I, I mean, the implementation details and the reasoning behind the this request is totally reasonable. I'm just trying to figure out whether it would affect other types of job or just index jobs, or what would be the use cases for one or the other. Um, and although the pod policy, pod restart policy, pod failure policy, uh, seems like a good spot for implementation. I'm not sure if that would be desirable in the long run because we would be basically hiding something. It would be like trying to hide a lock of functionality inside of a different functionality because that wasn't the goal of the pod failure policy to be able to control how a controller will react to recreating pods in a job, whether it will be immediate or it will be only after a pod is fully removed from the cluster, it gets replaced. So I'm kind of, uh, and this is kind of similar to what we've been doing with PDBs recently, where PDB um, got introduced the policy which allows it to differently count terminating pods and non-terminating pods for the disruptions. So I'm seeing this as something similar. So I would probably think about a little bit more exploration, whether we want to do it just for index or for all type, and probably would try to keep it away from the pod failure policy, maybe.
Mhm.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Oh, sorry. Um, so I think in the case of non-index jobs, you can see that this is like super like it's a behavior that is from the beginning of job. And I got this comment from Eric Toon that you can see there. So in the model that non-index jobs serve, which is kind of like a worker pulling tasks from a queue, it doesn't really make sense to not restart a task as soon as possible. So, and I think that will probably be something some users might depend on. Now, I don't think we can say the same about index jobs, but On the other hand, it's also behavior that is already there as GA. So that's my hesitation on making this global for index jobs. And on the other hand, the pod failure policy, it's about pod failure. So one of the fields is having well, the only field today is those rules, but we made it a struct, so with the potential that it could span in the future. And this is one possible expansion because it is a failure mode. So it's about deciding what to do when a pod is finished, which is a failure mode in most scenarios, right? Most scenarios, whatever is deleting the pod is a controller that is issuing some kind of maintenance or preemption or whatnot. So it does fit in there, and it also fits in the sense that we are depending on the jobs on the pods to finish to take decisions, such as whether there is an exit code, or whether there is a condition. But in any case, we need the pod to finish before actually taking action. So I think for me, it's rather pretty clear that it fits within the pod failure policies. But my hesitation is about index jobs in general. I think if we had made the decision back then when we implemented index jobs to make it not or wait for pods to finish before replacing, I think it would have made total sense in retrospective. But since we're already with a GA behavior, I'm a little bit hesitant. So yeah, any other thoughts on this?
I mean, my main hesitation around the failed status of a pod, and I mean, we already have a pretty strong strongly defined what it means that a pod failed. And in the majority of cases, people expect that a failed is something that just, it doesn't matter how long it's waiting for deletion, it is marked as deleted, or it's marked for deletion. It is in pretty much all the controllers, it is being treated as one, because non-existent, and that's what we're creating. And for the majority of controllers, it does make sense. But for this one, I'm hesitant because it would be basically changing the definition of a failed, unless you're talking that you would be introducing two modes within the pod failure policy.
Yeah, that's
one would be for the current failed, where it matches the current behavior, and then there will be the, I don't know, deleted or permanently removed or something that would express that it's gone, and only then you would be taking an action. So you would have like two failure modes. One would be the soft failure, and the one would be the hard failure, or whatever the name that you can come up with. I don't know, just thinking out loud.
Yes, I think that would be, of course, adding a configuration field would be the safest option. So, but that means, yeah, well, that basically means we cannot do it now because the enhancement freeze is gone. Which is, yeah, that's problematic for some users. But yeah, I mean, it's the process. So if that's the path we have to go, then that will be it. For the discussion, I think it's pretty simple, a pretty simple thing to add. So yeah, I guess the point of bringing out this topic now to the meeting is rather to treat it as a bug, and that's what we wanted to bring.
As a bug in the
In
pod failure policy,
the
or
pod
a
failure
bug in
policy, yes, and also because the feature is still beta, there is room for adjustment based on feedback, right? And this is some feedback we are getting from our users. So that's kind of my take on it.
I'm not sure if that's how I understood it, because I mean, if it's a bug, maybe we don't need a new mode, but as far as how I understood the need for the new mode is that it's hard to attribute that it's a bug to any of the features discussed. So we would introduce a new API field that introduces this behavior like independently. Maybe we can embed it in the pod failure policy, but maybe it requires its own cap and like it's an enhancement, or that's how I at least took the comment, so that we don't make it a bug, but rather enhancement, and we use pod failure policy to embed the new failure mode. Is it what you suggested?
Yeah, I think that's the obvious path that we can take. We treat it as a new feature, and there is not much argument. I suppose people need it, so it can be easily added as a new feature. So, but the question is where we can treat it as a bug. And I think another, in the existing controllers, there is one example where we actually wait, right, which is the stateful set. So, and then that's the same case here, right? We're talking about an index job. So it kind of fits in that model. But again, it's GA functionality. If we just talk about index jobs, it's GA functionality that we don't know if people are really relying on it. So we cannot change it, right? Whereas pod failure policy is ongoing feature, which, so I think if we, it's a tricky one, because we could change the behavior in beta and then wait for the next release to add a fallback to make the behavior configurable, but again based on feedback. So that's, yeah, I guess those are our three options, right? Wait for the next release and add the field. Change the behavior in this release and add a field back in the next release if people ask for it. And treat it as a bug for index job, which is probably the most controversial option.
Yeah, I think the index job train has gone, and introducing that there would be requiring like entirely new field where you would be able to set some kind of a policy. I'm trying to read the first statement in the marking pod as a failed, where we're clearly stating that we will be acting on failed pod only when they actually reach the terminal phase. So theoretically, reading that means we should be doing this already. And it seems like, yeah, I could probably agree with the approach. Oh, we can just treat it as a bug and let's see where people go with that. Because in the proposal, we said that we will take actions only from the terminal phase. And apparently we're not doing that the right way yet.
Right. I guess the scenario where we are looking at it is about taking the decision of whether to terminate a job, but we are not withholding when we are trying to replace a pod. So that's yeah, which is inconsistent in a way. So that would be my best argument towards considering this a bug.
I mean, it's definitely one reasonable argument. My biggest worry is that we would be basically hiding the ability to affect how a pod replacement will be treated inside of the pod failure policy and not at the job type level or something along those lines. I'm not saying that it's good, but I'm not saying also that it's bad. It's just that it, in some way, it feels awkward that to do it this way.
All right.
And also, if we go for this way, then I don't know yet if how much committed to this we are, but for now, for pod failures policy, we plan for GA+1 to actually unconditionally wait until the pod is really failed, with counting it as failed with job controller. And then if we want to be symmetric, this would mean that when pod failure policy is GA+1, we also remove probably the if we want, like, if the argument is symmetry of pod failure policy of handling when we count as failed and when we create the replacement pod, then probably we should also at the GA+1 for pod failure policy eliminate the if, and this will mean that also index jobs change their behavior in this regard. And I'm not sure if this is what we want. So if you like go to graduation criteria for GA in the doc, you can see that this is like what we planned for. At least this is what currently is planned for pod failure policy for GA. Yeah, for GA+1 in the deprecation section. We wanted actually to remove this if, so that to simplify the job controller and always wait for pods to be in the terminal phase, regardless if pod failure policy is specified or not. Maybe that's not a good idea, but this is what we currently have in plan. And this would, again, if we go for the symmetry argument, then this would mean that also we eliminate the if for creating the replacement, if I understand correctly what you mean. So that's my thought. What do you think?
Yeah, but that would mean that it would affect all pods created or recreated in every job.
Yes.
So that would affect both the job, as long as it's fine for the terminating ones, because at most you're changing when they are actually accounted as failed or succeeded. During the replacement, it's a little bit more tricky because people in some cases might be relying on the fact that we are replacing failed pods immediately up to fulfill the current
I guess could a potential solution be that another criteria for graduation to GA is that we have the knob as part of the policy, but then the question is which one is the default behavior?
I'll probably leave the default the current that we have because that seems the uh most widely used currently, and it's basically similar with what the other controllers do. Uh, Even though that for, like you said, for index jobs, that would not be the desirable. Although, given that this
So
issue popped up only now,
one more proposal, just to give us some time, right? Just to gain us some time. So maybe we can do this new field as a criteria for this cap. There is so there is a new field to control when to replace the pod, and then this is part of the pod failure policy. And as such, we can still add it in this release. As since it's a new field, it still has to be gated, still has to be false by default. And only in the next release we can make it, we can re-enable it back.
where would you put the field inside of the pod failure policy?
Yes, right next to rules.
And actually, if not specified, this could have different defaults depending if it's indexed or not indexed. Maybe it's an overkill.
No, we don't make defaults
you would,
rules.
yeah, you would be basically breaking the current index job users, because suddenly after a particular upgrade, the different defaults for index and non-index jobs would be causing the previously working index jobs to have a different behavior. So it would have to be an explicit opt-in for both cases equally.
Okay, so if SIG Apps is happy with that possibility of adding this field still disabled by default in 127, yes? Am I right? Yes, 27. I suppose we still need the buy-in from the release managers and API reviewers.
Most likely, yeah. If the API reviewers will be okay with that, I could probably support this being part of the pod failure policy. We'll probably need to change a little bit the structure description, because this one talks about back off limit, that it influences back off limit. But
Yes.
pod failure policy will be a little bit more, will gain extra powers, let's call it that way. And if it will be okay with the API approvers, then I think having a field here seems reasonable approach, honestly. And it would be equally valuable for both regular jobs or index jobs or anything else. And it would be also nicely fitting into the pod failure policy context.
Okay. All right, I guess if SIG Apps is happy with that, we will proceed with gathering the feedback from the release managers and API reviewers.
Yeah, that sounds cool. Thanks a lot for bringing this topic, Aldo and Michal.
Thank you.
Okay, moving
you.
on to the second topic. Yes, sorry, was someone talking? Okay. Andrea, Yuan, Deep, and Ravi. Decouple taint-based eviction from node lifecycle controller.
Yeah, I can take it.
Yeah, go ahead, Yuan.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay. Yeah, so hi everyone. I'm new to this group, but I think Aldo and you know me. So I'm a Kubernetes member, and in the past, I'm mainly working with the SIG scheduling, made a few contributions there. And of course, this first time I attended the meeting. So, okay. So this is a proposal we presented last week and at the SIG and the node and the meeting. Then later and Ravi and let us know, and actually this probably more related to this group and the SIG apps. Okay, so the idea and hopefully is quite straightforward. So we want and we are propose and to reflect the node lifecycle manager and in particular two functions, and one is this and the node and the lifecycle manager and tent a node, right? When a node is not healthy. The second one is called tent manager, is really and act on those tent. In particular is the no execute tents. Why do we want to do this? And so the main motivation is in our use cases, and we believe and it's general enough for some complex workloads. So the default and the tent manager, right, just evict and all these pods running pods. And when a node is marked and no execute tent is not flexible enough. Of course, you can use the toleration, but it's also there a lot of limitation. You have to change this and toleration, also the period and the time. For example, and in particular for stateful workloads, really, and they have local storage on the nodes. It's depending on a lot of different conditions, right? What type of the no execute tents or the workload properties and other factors. Then the customer and really want to have a more and customizable and flexible and tent manager and make a decision when or whether or not and evict a pods. So the key idea is, we definitely see a need to customize this and tent manager. The second reason, of course, is we noticed the implementation. The lifecycle manager actually just apply a certain subset of the no execute tent, right? Node not healthy, not reachable to the node, but users and you can tent the nodes and with any of the no execute tents. The tent manager actually apply to all these and no execute tents. So logically, we also think it would be nice to decouple these two and functions, right? One is particularly and apply or add some tents to the node. Another one is act on those tents. And so one other reason I want to mention is why we want to do this. We also noticed and things and the Kubernetes 1.27, currently there are a flag called enable the tent manager. Basically is you can disable or turn off the default tent manager, but from the 127 and it will become a default on. So with this feature, actually, based on current execution, there will be no way and to create or disable the default and the tent manager and apply your custom one. Okay, so basically that's the idea. We think the implementation should be quite straightforward. Also, I would expect the minimum, if any, and impact, right, on the past and or the backward compatibility. So yes, that's pretty much. So Ravi, do you have anything to add or comment?
Nothing from my side.
Yeah, so we like the feedback. Of course, now we have initial proposal, and last week had a stick node, and basically no argument, just said, yeah, put and submit issue. And first question, of course, is this group. I think we review it or make a decision. Then if the idea sounds reasonable, we are going to put together a formal cap, right, and submit it and collect the feedback. Hopefully targeting for the next release. Yeah.
I have a question for Aldo. What was the reason behind removing the enable taint manager flag?
So you mean why? Go ahead.
So one second. I need 1 second. Right. So the taint-based evictions feature was graduated to GA, and before this, the evictions. Oh, okay. I have it now. So evictions used to happen because of things like node pressure, things like that, and they were based on node conditions. The node conditions in the status. So scheduler was reacting based on this, or acting based on this. And taint-based evictions move that feature towards taints. And so there is a separate controller that taints nodes based on the conditions. And then the scheduler just simply relies on the taint feature, or taints and tolerations, to delete pods. And the reasoning was that with conditions you cannot, as a pod, you cannot opt out. With taints and tolerations, you can opt out from being evicted. So that's the rationale why we needed why we transitioned to taints. The next point is that, well, it's a feature that it was a new feature, so you wanted a way to disable it if things went wrong. So in theory, this flag should have gone away with the GA graduation, because that's now the default behavior. Scheduler is relying on it, so you always will need the taint manager, and that's why we are removing this flag and the behavior, or we mark it as deprecated, expecting it to always, like, this behavior always be active. Because if it's not, some things that the scheduler does that don't work. So that's a rationale. That's the whole story here.
Yeah, so Aldo, so I understand this. So since you are also familiar with the schedule, right? So what we are proposing, and I think, is basically make it more like the schedule, right? If we can decouple, have a separate and manage or control this taint manager, of course, by default, is still the behavior and the vanilla behavior, right? So that way, and I don't think it have any impact on the scheduler side. But on the taint manager side, if you decided to customize it, then we can replace this entire taint manager with a custom one, right? And so far, if we disable this one completely and one way, and there will be, I think, if it's very difficult, if not impossible, to customize this taint manager, right? As the question is whether or not we agree, and yeah, there are needs to customize this taint manager, but our use case definitely show that. Also, we mentioned even in Kubernetes itself, it has a customized behavior. If all the nodes and are tainted with this no execute nodes, and it won't evict nodes. So yeah.
So okay,
evict
so
pods, sorry.
This flag enable taint manager actually has two effects, and that's the problem. So one effect, of course, is that the taint manager doesn't run, but the other effect is that what actually runs is the old behavior, which is the one based on on conditions. So if you want to, basically what I'm hearing is that you want to disable the taint manager, but you probably also want to disable the behavior that the taint manager was supposed to replace. So in that case, you don't want this flag. You want a new flag that that has that meaning.
Yeah. I agree. And which flag or what will be new flag? So like the proposal, yeah, of course, I want to get everyone's opinion, particularly you are familiar with this and yeah, flag. So what we are proposing said, yeah, decouple reflect this node lifecycle manager and have two separate and component. One is the current, right, the lifecycle manager, and do all this taint thing and add the taints to nodes. And the second, but let's move this and the taint manager functionality and the action on the node taint, right? No execute taint as a separate controller or manager. Then we can have a new flag and a control, right? Whether or not to use the default one, or if customer want to and replace it with their own customer one, they can just disable this default one. Yeah. Conceptually, we think this is probably more similar and close to, yeah, like a scheduler thing, right? You decouple this two independent function. Then even other controller can act, right, on this and taint manager separately. So
yes, I think I see no concern. Yeah, as soon as assuming the existing label, the existing flag still goes away, and the old behavior doesn't come back.
I mean, the goal would be to have two separate controllers. Currently, I'm guessing, I haven't looked under the hood. The taint manager is being run as part of the node lifecycle controller, and by the ability to split them in as two separate processes running in the controller manager, you have the ability to affect which controllers are running. But my question is, what part of the taint-based evictions mechanism that you're missing that you want to entirely disable the taint manager?
Yeah, so firstly, for example, the default one, right? If the node and has any of the taint and no execute taints and the default behavior will evict the ports. Our stateful ports in particular have the local persistent volume, the data there. We don't want to do that. And on the other hand, it's not just the simple for notifications, depending on what type of the stateful workloads, right? A different database, storage, other thing. It may check this and no execute taint, right? And also depending on this workload, if they can tolerate to lose the data or how worse, right? Overall cluster condition. It's really depending on the application. Yeah, in our cases, we have a customer controller and want to have full control of this and yeah, whether or not when to evict and the stateful ports. Like I said, the simple scenario, we don't want to just evict stateful ports and that have local storage on the bad nodes or tainted nodes. Yeah.
Sorry, but
the toleration is not. So far, we just use the toleration, yeah, but it's not flexible enough. And in particular, given this flag will be disabled, then we realize it will be very hard for us to support this customizable taint-based eviction in the future. Yeah.
Excuse me, but that was the whole point of migrating to taints, that you can now still like avoid these disruptions if you have the toleration. So yeah, while I agree that it makes sense to separate these things, do this decoupling, I'm not understanding the use case, because that was the whole point, and you can have tolerations. and you can do them through a webhook or whatever else. So I'm not understanding why you need to disable it.
Okay, so decouple it. So yeah, the first thing, let's agree and said combine these two, right? The one is a subset of tense added, another one is yeah, can apply any logical there, and yeah, it's nice to reflect. So if the question said why not just rely on the toleration? So could you scroll down to the other considered, and I put some comments here, right? So overall, and I think a high-level comments to respond to it is, like I said, is in our cases, the decision is somehow is very dynamic and complicated or complex, and so that so far we rely on the toleration, like I said, is still not enough because the tense can be added dynamically in our case, right? Even administrator, whatever the reason could be added. That the second is the decision. And we have to look at a lot of factors which can change over the time, make the decision. So it's not like a static one, just add a toleration set always and evict it on this type of the tense or not evicted on that type of tense. Yeah. So because the stateful workloads, we have all different type of stateful workloads. So that's why, and yeah, we see, yeah, then that's these like other thing we mentioned from implementation perspective. Yeah, if we want to and just add or modify the tense and more dynamically, and it will require, yeah, a lot of changes and yeah, the commutation webhook, other thing. I don't know if it makes sense, and yeah, unfortunately, I'm not sure I'm able to share the detail of the workloads, but we did see, yeah. So basically, it's the eviction logic of the tent-based one, and yeah, we see there are some, yeah, the needs about it. For example, here we mentioned even in Kubernetes, right? I mentioned earlier that if all nodes already and unhealthy, and the tent manager wants to evict any ports, right? So you cannot really define a toleration policy to realize this type of the policy, right? But of course, if we separate them and yeah, can disable it. So the question is, I think, is decoupling them makes sense, and whether or not we should disable the default one. But we try to hopefully, yeah, argue, yeah, there needs to customize it, at least keep this flexible enough.
This reminds me of another discussion we recently had about preemption, disabling preemption for nodes, for pods with low priority. And so yeah, we ended up concluding that it's not in the user, it shouldn't be in the user's realm to decide whether they can continue running. These are all policies that administrators set for a reason, and giving control back to the workload authors sounds problematic. That's my thinking right now, and in the particular case of the taint manager, all the taints are added by Kubernetes, so they are well documented. There won't be new ones, so users can know which tolerations they could have based on the node's problems. So I'm still not seeing why there is a reason, but on the other hand, if it's a field that you want to just like disable for your clusters, I have no saying on that, I guess. And as long as it's not an option for the pods, I mean, we cannot stop you.
I think one of the things that we want to do is we want to have much more control when it comes to the eviction or deletion of pods. That is all what I think Yuan is trying to say without divulging the details. So we can have systems that are much more knowledgeable than Kubernetes. By that, what I mean is, before the eviction happens, should some other system be consulted? those are the type of things that we are looking at. And we wanted to see, instead of Kubernetes taking an action and then evicting or deleting right away, can it actually have some sort of extension mechanism so that it can talk to an external system that has got the knowledge of the entire workload that is spread across Kubernetes and non-Kubernetes clusters. And we wanted to have a bit more of control rather than Kubernetes taking those decisions for us. Does that answer your question, Andrew?
I guess
Yeah,
partially, one thing to notice as well is that tolerations are actually mutable. So you could have your controller control the tolerations instead. But again, if you just want to do this in your clusters, I feel like it's up to you, right? I don't know if anybody else has another opinion.
The upgrade part would be a bit more complicated when you have when you need to have a webhook which actually does the toleration updates on the pods. And there could also be the workload that is actually distributed across a Kubernetes cluster and a non-Kubernetes cluster, where you would have very less control over, and the system may not understand the Kubernetes API as such.
Yeah, thanks, Ravi. And yeah, so the point, and let me try to summarize. And we agree that, yeah, it would be nice to reflect this too. The question really is that, okay, in most cases, and do we really need and the customer need and the customer want to replace the default, right? And the vanilla tenant manager. So yeah, we try to argue, and if we separate these two, at least this provide this and flexibility, functionality, and the customer. Maybe, and we could, depending on the use cases, right? We could argue, and yeah, 80% of the customers, and yeah, may not need to and customize and or replace this default one. But at least in our cases, we do see and needs, and like Ravi mentioned, so for our stateful workloads, maybe run on different platform, we do have a controller to manage this in the stateful status. Now is manipulate the tense toleration, yeah, like Aldo you mentioned. But we have seen, yeah, this and it's not flexible enough, right? So if we separate them, yeah, at least I would argue benefit is then the user can, yeah, replace it. Maybe just a simple flag that, yeah, disable this. The current, of course, we can disable it, but the default behavior controller, then you can run any of your controller and to do it. Okay, we have 5 more minutes, and so any further comments or what's recommendation? And should we just go ahead and submit a cap, then collect more feedback and see how we're going to proceed?
Per se, I don't have any objections
Mhm.
into the split.
Mhm.
Although I'd be curious to know, maybe we can evaluate options or alternatives in the cap itself.
Mhm.
What would be the value if you would,
Mhm.
for example,
Mhm.
implement the mutating webhook? How much the mutating webhook would be more complicated than disabling the taint manager and writing your own? The logical code for both would be similar. If that's the case, why would we want to go the path of disable that and produce entirely new code, which could easily be done with the default cluster with just the addition of the webhooks? I'm not entirely, I don't feel too strongly with the scheduler bits of Duke. So it's hard for me to give some good recommendation, but definitely those would be the things that I would want to see being checked before we start dividing the current controller. Especially that if we are missing something in the taint-based evictions, which are meant to replace the mechanism for disabling the taint manager, then I'm guessing that maybe there's some additional discussion required with the SIG scheduling. Maybe there's something missing in that mechanism, which would allow you to inject your additional decisions that you're taking. And I know that scheduler had a couple of those extra extension points. I don't know. But it will be good to double checking with the SIG scheduling about their inputs before eventually proceeding with that.
Okay, great. Yeah, the comments were taken. So we add more detail about use cases and compare, also see why we want this approach over, right? The toleration, other thing. And also on the scheduler side of things, and Wei Huang, who is the co-chair of the SIG scheduling, also my colleague, and already collect some feedback, but we keep him in the loop, also Eldor and other people in the loop. So one last question. So should this and be reviewed mainly by this group, SIG Apps, and of course we can keep like SIG nodes, SIG scheduling, and all other people in the loop. But I think this probably owned by this team, right? This group.
I wouldn't be so strict about who owns it. It looks like this is the one of those controllers which is shared between those three groups.
Okay. We keep all them.
Really want to see inputs from all of them.
Okay.
SIG node gave a clear information that they are pushing towards SIG apps. I don't want to be the one pushing towards SIG scheduling, but I do want to hear their input and all the heads and objections before we make the final call to go one way or the other. It would be good to get their inputs, and if we decide to go the route of the split, having their opinions voiced out in the CAP or the alternatives that we considered when we went with this approach. What were the other things considered? Maybe the question is, should that be changed on the scheduler side of things, or actually we are better off with the split? Those will be the questions that I'll be looking for before starting the CAP.
Okay, great. Thanks for the feedback, and we're going to put together a CAP and keep you in the loop. Also, Aldo, and we definitely will, CC you and have your opinion input. Thanks again for all the comments and feedback. Thank you very much.
Oh, that reaches us to top of the hour. Thank you very much all for today, and see you in 2 weeks. Bye all.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.